talk of the college football playoff. This from Dennis Dodd leads us to What the H? And it's brought to you by Rick Terry Jewelry Design.
What the? What was he thinking?
Release the hounds.
The Dave Hooker Show.
Keep cool.
A presentation of OffTheHookSports.com.
I learned from Jimmy Himes that there's no need in knocking other journalists, so I'm not going to point out the fact that Dennis Dodd also reported that there were whispers that Nico wasn't worth the money. But despite that, now I'll report that from Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports that they're going to stick with the format that they talked about, which includes 6 conference champions. I guess the Pac-3 will fight amongst themselves. Jimmy, how can you still give the Pac-12 unless they do something drastically good in the near future? How can you still give them an automatic berth?
Especially if they become the Pac-1.
You automatically get in. You just sit out the season and you make it.
Well, you got to win 3 games, okay? Let's be real. We got to have some, integrity with this. So 3 wins get you in. I don't think they can stick with 6 under the current situation of the Pac-12. Maybe what happens is the Pac-12 annexes the Mountain West, or the Pac-12 teams that have no home go to the Mountain West, and then the Mountain West becomes one of those conferences. But at this time, I see 5 conferences. Now, and I think this is all talk right now. I think this is all talk. I think there will be some settlement that will be made before the season, before next season, when they implement the 12-team playoff. So they may be saying they're going to stick with 6 right now, but I think that is flexible.
Jimmy, sorry, David, we're going to
go ahead, Joe.
So I don't know where you land on this, but I'm still of the mindset that the ACC is going to fold before next year, or it's going to happen. What happened to the Pac-12 will happen to the ACC. Don't know when, because I know they got that grant of rights deal till 2036. But I just don't think that's as ironclad as everybody says it is. So when that happens, though, you really will have a Power 3, Big 12, Big 10, and SEC. At some point, isn't the playoff just going to have to take the top 4 conference champions if they're going to actually make the regular season matter at all, rather than the top 5 or 6?
Under your scenario, yes. But one of the things I'm having trouble with is where are all these ACC teams going to go? Where are they going to go?
Well, I think there's going to be a bidding war for North Carolina between the SEC and Big Ten. I think both conferences want North Carolina. I think there's going to be a bidding war for Virginia. Virginia is a top 20 revenue producing school in college athletics right now. And so I think those 2 have a home. I think Miami has a home in the Big Ten, and Florida State and Clemson have homes in the SEC. I think so. Those 5, 6s are pretty set. And then maybe NC State, Georgia Tech could go to the Big 12, Duke, those schools.
Well, I can't believe you would think the Big Ten would expand all the way to Miami. I mean, they like to keep things close-knit, okay?
No.
Why would they go to South Florida? I mean, that doesn't make any geographical sense, Caleb.
You're right. I forgot. They're just a Midwestern conference.
Hey, do you want to hear something that I said, like, when all this conference realignment started that sounded crazy and people called me an absolute idiot? What about if the SEC targeted North Carolina and Duke? Duke has a respectable football program, and then suddenly, bingo, bango, you're not only the football conference, you're the basketball conference as well.
Well, that is interesting. You would also think that they might, and I think they would target North Carolina, Florida State, and somebody else you would think about. There are other schools you would think about. Duke didn't come to mind immediately, and I get your point about basketball, because they're really good. The SEC is pretty good in basketball right now. It'd be even better when they get Duke, okay, and North Carolina. But what a boost that would be to your conference in basketball. So maybe they do go in that direction. And Mike Elko's done a terrific job at Duke. I mean, people forget last year they won 9 games and they got 17 starters back, and they just whipped Clemson, soundly whipped Clemson. So they are on the rise. They've done a nice job. Maybe that's the direction they go. I know that Sankey does not want to expand, but I think his hand is going to be forced, and he's not going to have much of an option on this. So he's going to have to add some teams. But I think he would prefer. He even said at the in Nashville, Dave, and you were there. I'm sure you heard at the football media days where he said that he wanted things to settle down, that he wanted the SEC to stay at 16 for the next few years, and then like 2 days later, there was an announcement that 2 other teams were leaving the Pac-12 going to the Big Ten. So that didn't take long. His settling down for a few years lasted about 2 days. So there'll be more shifts probably, and I think that'll force the SEC to expand.
Jimmy, going there, I try to be diplomatic, but Dave knows where I stand on this. It seems to me that Greg Sankey wasn't really forward thinking, and just Texas and Oklahoma reached out to him, and like, who's going to say no when Texas and Oklahoma reach out to you? Mm-hmm. But he's getting caught flat-footed with Big Ten expanding, and he got caught flat-footed on the TV contracts. I mean, let's just be honest. The Big Ten has a 7-year deal worth $7 billion. The SEC has a 10-year deal worth $3 billion. Mm-hmm. And isn't that going to, in the long run, in the age of NIL, make the Big Ten more competitive because they now have more money for boosters to throw at athletes? You have more money to hire good coaches, things like that.
First off, the assumption that boosters would throw money at athletes is absurd, Caleb.
No,
you know better than that.
You're craziness.
Yeah,
especially not Dante Thornton.
Yeah,
because he wouldn't catch it.
Yeah, it wasn't enough money. He dropped it. Yeah, Caleb, I think that's a really good point, in particular on the TV contracts. I think you're exactly right about that. The Big Ten did a 7-year deal. The SEC didn't need to do a 10-year deal, shouldn't have done a 10-year deal. Now they're trapped with that contract. Now, here's what I don't know about it. If the SEC adds 2 teams, can they tear up that contract and say, we want more? Flip side of that, how's ESPN and ABC doing financially? Not very well. They are. So they're not going to pony up a whole lot more money. They would not give the SEC more money when the SEC said, hey, if we add another conference game, we go from 8 to 9 conference games, you pay us more money. ESPN said no, which is one reason they're fighting about 8 versus 9. That's a money issue, and the SEC is trying to negotiate more money out of that. So, Caleb, I think you're exactly right about this TV deal. And but also in terms of Sankey and his bosses are these presidents and so forth. I don't think the SEC wants to expand anymore. I think it's a collective feeling that we don't need to be adding teams. I don't like the way this is going. But as I mentioned earlier, I think their hand is going to be forced to add more teams, like you're saying. So I think the SEC ultimately will probably get to 20 teams. I think
that's really rich, given the fact that the SEC drove expansion before any other conference back in 1992.
Yeah, they added 2 teams in 92, and then they added 2 more teams about 20 years later. So yeah, you're right. It's they drove expansion. Now they're like, let's put on the brakes.
They're the ones who destroyed the Southwest Conference. Like, the SEC literally is the reason the Southwest Conference, a 100-year-old conference, dissolved. That's their fault.
Well, at least now, Jimmy, they own that St. Louis television market.
Oh, boy. That's been very lucrative for them, hasn't it?
Missouri, the worst ad in the history of conference.
No, Rutgers to the Big Ten is the worst ad in the history of conference. They thought the New York market, as if New York, living on the East Coast, New York City people don't care about college sports. It was just a dumb move.
Nobody watches Rutgers in New Jersey. Much less New York.
No, I bet you there are more Rams fans in St. Louis than there are Missouri Tigers fans.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like rooting.
The Rams aren't even there anymore. Yeah,
so they're rooting for the LA Rams. Last thing I got for you, and portions of the program are brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Enjoy life when you see better. Look at me, no glasses, no contacts. Local vision service for LASIK, cataract surgery, and regular eye examination. Go to ccteyes.com, and they bring you the Vol Report with Jacob Warren, which we'll have up on the YouTube channel later this afternoon. Jimmy, if I put the over-under at 2 years, so going into the 24, 25, 26, going into the 26th season, and you had to bet that there will be a mega conference which stands apart from the rest of the Division I NCAA schools or not, which would you bet?
I'm going to bet against a mega conference. And here's why. It's the TV contracts already in place. I think that is going to preclude them from doing that. Why would the Big Ten tear it up and say, "Hey, let's break away"? They're in great shape financially. There would be some people that would prefer that. Now, having said that, I never thought USC and UCLA would be in the Big Ten or Rutgers. So I didn't see a lot of this coming. And so maybe I'm not very good at being a visionary, but I'm going to say the TV contracts are going to hold up going to a mega conference. And you still need a governing body. I mean, look, I think the NCAA has done a lot of stupid things. Well, what's the NCAA? It's the member schools. It's the member institutions that are voting on this stuff. So I'm going to say I don't think they're going to go there, but I'm not going to say with much confidence. And the reason being the TV contracts, I think, will preclude it.